I'm going to um, have you guys sound check me real quick. Let me know if you can hear me. Um, it is loud in my home. So let me know. Yes or no. And if you can see me okay. I have all the lights on, but it's still kind of dark. Okay. Perfect. All right. So I want to start off with I have a feeling a lot of people did not finish the playlist from some of the girls that were talking to me at the NHS decorating today after school. Most people only made it 3/5 of the way, maybe 4/5 of the way, 80% through the playlist. So that makes me very concerned that we didn't finish. The beauty in that is that the easier stuff is at the end of this playlist and the harder stuff is at the beginning. So that is a plus. The fourth bar of the playlist is on consumer and producer surpluses, and that was what we did on Friday together, and not on Friday together, on Friday in the quiz, and then again on Monday together. So we've covered consumer and producer surplus twice now in class, which is a lot of what that was. And the end of the playlist, I'm going to open it up in another tab real quick so I can see what I'm talking about. The end of the playlist has a lot to do with trade and price ceilings and price floors, I believe, if I recall correctly. So if I need to talk about that, I can. I also want to make sure we talk about the test and kind of what to expect tomorrow. So, I'll start off with that since it's already almost 9 and some people go to bed earlier than I do. The first question on the test, it's going to be on Google, on AP Classroom, just like it was last time. So it's the same program for the test and same maneuverability. The AP exam in May will not be on the computer. It will be a paper-based exam, but tomorrow it will be on the computer. It grades faster, so I can get grades back to you faster. Question 1 is an FRQ. It is a 5-point FRQ. The FRQ has to do with the same kind of stuff the FRQ we did on Monday and last week. You have to be able to draw a supply and demand curve. Guys, if you cannot do that at this point, we have massive problems. You have to be able to graph a supply and demand curve and label it properly. I think it was 4th hour today. You guys made me lose my mind because we were having some problems. So you have to be able to graph that. You have to be able to graph a tax, a per unit tax on your graph. Again, that is exactly what we did. Oh my God, you guys are the best. I really love my job. You have to graph a per unit tax. We did that on Monday, and I was talking about it in class today in one of my classes. I don't remember which one. You have to know what consumer surplus looks like and how it changes. Oh, you have to know how the price change impacts consumers and how it impacts producers and how tax revenue looks on the graph. So that's the part of the FRQ. Okay. So, Anthony, not oh no, learn the graph. Just learn the graph. I promise it's really simple. If you have problems with this graph, on Thursday, you're going to start to cry because that unit 3 starts on Thursday, and that's the scary graphs. It's the scariest graphs is unit 3. Oh, okay. So that's the FRQ. So there's one question, 5-point FRQ. It is not the same as Friday. It is not the same as Monday, but it is along the same lines. It's asking for the same type of information in a different way. So it's all stuff that we've done and you should be pretty familiar with. Okay. Are there any questions on that, not content-wise, just on setup or anything like that? I'll get into content questions in a minute. Okay, so then that's question 1 on all 3 tests, question number 1. The rest of the questions are randomized. And there are 31 multiple choice questions. It's a lot bigger than yes, wait. Okay. I'll wait. While you are making me wait for your question, I am going to look, Diet Cherry Dr. Pepper. I feel like I'm a walking advertisement. Content. Yes, I'm going to get into content, Gabby, in a minute. Give me a second, because I just wanted to kind of explain to people what the test looks like first, just in case people are trying to go to bed. And then I will go through any and all content questions you have. So question 1 was FRQ, 5 points. 2 through 32 are multiple choice questions. And I ended up making the test longer than the Unit 1 test because a lot of people were very nervous about the fact that the last test was so small, but every question was worth like 5 points or something. So with 32 questions, 31 multiple choice plus a 5-point FRQ, that's 36 points possible. Every question is only going to be worth 3 points, but it'll still be out of 100. So you can call that a 6-point curve if you want, but I mean, there's 106 points possible, but it will only be out of 100. So that's what the whole test is going to be. 31 multiple choice questions and 1 FRQ. So there's that. I will give you the paper for the FRQ to write it down in my classroom tomorrow. So you will get a specific piece of paper to answer your FRQ on. And I think that is that. All right. Next, I want to answer any direct questions you guys have about something that you're confused on first. And then I'll go question by question through topics, test topics specifically. So does anyone have any content specific question or specific standards that they were confused on or struggling with? Or I know elasticity is hard, and I know a lot of people had issues with elasticity. I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth between my email and the playlist and my stuff. Playlist for Unit 2 open. Okay. Elasticity. On the FRQs, there's going to be a graph like we have to add on to it. It's the second part, Anthony. For the FRQ, you have to draw the graph. You have to draw the tax. You have to know how to trace out consumer surplus. You have to know how to make the rectangle of tax revenue. You have to do all of the things that we were doing on my board. You have to do them. There's no graph given to you. Like part 1 literally says, draw a supply and demand curve and label equilibrium. That is the first thing you have to do. So there's that. Okay, I have a set of sticky notes right here, so I'm going to start writing down because your comments are going really fast across my screen. So elasticity, excise taxes, and tax incidence, not excise tax, but tax incidence. Okay, incidence. Elasticity and formulas. Okay, perfect. Okay, so elasticity, once you understand it, you'll realize it's actually very, very simple. It's just so out there from anything you've ever had to even think about before. That's what I think makes it very difficult to kind of wrap your head around. And I'm going to try and get my paper over here so I can write down what I'm saying. And that way I can focus better because I lose my train of thought easily. Okay, so when we are measuring elasticity, we are measuring how responsive people are to price changes. When a company, for elasticity of demand, how do people respond? When a company puts their product on sale, are you going to buy more Are you going to buy the same or are you going to buy less? What are you going to do? The law of demand tells us by default, price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. They say more people will buy it or people will buy more of it. But the question really is for a company to determine how much more or how much less. Elasticity is actually one of the things in microeconomics, elementary microeconomics like this, early economics levels, that actually businesses use all the time. So if I offer a special, how much more are people going to buy? And how much will that increase my revenue? Am I actually going to make more money or am I going to hurt my total revenue? And the answer to that question is all based on the elasticity of demand for my product. If my product is inelastic, perfectly inelastic, a vertical line on the axes, I can change my price to whatever I want and people will buy the exact same amount no matter what. So that means I could seriously increase my revenue generation as a company just because people want my stuff. If I have perfectly elastic demand, that's the horizontal line. If I have perfectly elastic demand for my product and I change my price even a penny, I will lose 100% of my sales. No one will buy from me. And the reason for that is because they have other alternatives. And so I cannot touch my price. So those are the two extremes, is perfectly inelastic or perfectly elastic. But between this and this, we have a whole range of elasticities to look at. Okay. These sometimes you do have to have government involvement because of that. So sometimes, yes. Now, when we look at elasticity, there are three different things you can use to see or calculate elasticity. The first is the determinants of elasticity. That's kind of a multiple choice kind of range, like question, like if this good has a lot of substitutes, is it elastic or inelastic? Well, lots of substitutes mean that if you raise your price, I'll go buy something else. So I'm elastic, relatively elastic or perfectly elastic. If it has no substitutes, you will pay whatever the cost is. So that means it's going to be perfectly inelastic. The example I gave today to some kids was an EpiPen. If you have allergies, you have to carry an EpiPen. It doesn't matter what they are going to charge you for the EpiPen, you will buy it. Okay. You are not going to stock up on extra EpiPens if they have a sale because they expire. So buying 10 EpiPens does you no good because there's an expiration date. You're going to buy the exact number of EpiPens that you need. So for example, my nephew, my cousin's son, has super bad allergies to bees or something. I can't remember. But anyways, he has to have an EpiPen. And his school mandates 2. He has to have one in his backpack and one in the nurse's office. So, and then she keeps one at the house and one in her car or something like that. I can't remember exactly. So every time they expire, she has to buy 4. It doesn't matter the cost of the EpiPens. She's going to buy 4 because she has to do that. So she is perfectly inelastic demand for EpiPens. They could be $1 billion. And because it's her son's life, she will pay for it. And if it's on sale, she's still going to just buy 4 because in 6 months they will expire. And if she bought extra and they went unused, then it was pointless. So inelastic, yes, is that way. Now, to find inelastic demand, we're going to use the price elasticity of demand formula, the PED, sometimes just written ED, elasticity of demand, and or PED. And we're looking at the percent change in quantity demanded divided by the percent change in price. Okay, so this coefficient, the solution to this equation, is going to be less than 1 to be inelastic. Now, I'm going to talk to you as if you are a math person. If you are a math person, all right, think about it this way. Price goes up 100%. Quantity stays the same. The denominator keeps getting bigger and the quantity stays the same or changes only a little bit. That means this fraction is less than 1. Okay? That's less than. Yeah, I had to make sure I wrote that right because it's backwards on my camera. Okay, so that means less than 1. That's inelastic demand. If the quantity demanded, the top changes more than the denominator, the numerator changes more than the denominator. If price changes only a little bit, maybe 1% price change, and people stop buying it. Quantity demand changes rapidly. It's greater than 1. Then we have elastic demand. So this is greater than 1 is elastic demand. Okay. And if they change at a constant ratio, where the percent change in price is equal to the percent change in quantity demanded, if they're exactly the same, then that's going to be equal to 1. And that is called unitary elasticity. Unitary elasticity. Okay. All right. Do I need to do the percent change formula, or do you understand the percent change to get to this? There's not really an example of unitary elasticity. It's just any product that, like, I increase my price 5%, my sales fall 5%. I have a unitary elastic demand product. Okay, so to find percent change, someone in one of my classes said it a really good way. I'm trying to remember what they said. They go, difference over average, I think is what they said. So it's the difference of the two quantities over the average of the two quantities. Okay, so the difference in quantities, Q2 minus Q1, over the average. And then that's the percent change for quantity. And then for price, you do P2 minus P1 over P2 plus P1 divided by 2. Okay. Now, when you guys took the quiz last Friday, a lot of people did the formula right, but they didn't get the points because I got really upset. They found the coordinates for the supply curve, not the demand curve. This one is the PED. When it's asking for elasticity of demand, you have to use the coordinates on the demand curve. So a lot of you guys on Friday found, like, the first coordinate, and then you found the second coordinate, and you did the subtraction, you did the average, you found everything, and you got the answer was unitary, which it would have been if they were asking about the price elasticity of supply, but they wanted demand, and you were on the wrong curve. So make sure to pay attention to the details. All right, because that's going to be a big kicker for you if you misread the question. Okay, so Gabby, crash course on calculating it. Difference over average, difference over average. I tell my kids every year, you have to remember that money is the foundation of economics. So the money's on the bottom. So always do price on the bottom. Or another way to remember it is it's not slope, it's run over rise instead of rise over run. So it's your run up here over the rise down here. Okay, quantity over price. Okay. The biggest thing to remember is that when we're calculating elasticity, we are not calculating the slope. And the reason that is important is because the slope of a line is constant throughout, but a product has different elasticities at different price levels. And we will get into that into extreme detail in Unit 4, but you just have to remember something, when it's only $1, you're very, very price inelastic, because it can go from $1 to $2. That's 100% price increase, and you really don't care so much. But if something goes from like $10 to $20, again, 100% price increase, but you're gonna be like, that's a big jump. So you're more elastic at high prices and inelastic at low prices. So elasticity can change along the exact same demand curve at different parts. Absolute and comparative advantage. I do not think there's any questions from Unit 1 on this test. I don't think. I didn't reread through it this afternoon. I meant to, but I do not think there is. So give me a second. All right. Supply. Demand. Yes. Gabby, yes. Z, depends on your budget. Yes, income elasticity of demand is a whole nother formula, and elasticity of demand, just general price elasticity of demand, has a percent of budget component. If something's a large percent of your budget, you're elastic, and if it's a small percent of your budget, you're inelastic, typically. Elasticity, market elasticity. There's a lot of elasticity questions. Consumer surplus, producer surplus. I'm still checking to see if there's anything from Unit 1 on here. Tax, ceiling. I'm so sorry, this is taking me forever. Oh, there's a question on command economies. There's a question on production possibilities curves. There's a question on scarcity. If you don't get the scarcity question right, I'm kicking you out of my class. That was day 1. Oh, there is one question on comparative advantage. Okay. So there is one question from each of the 5 standards from Unit 1. So there's one question on scarcity, one question on PPCs, one question on comparative advantage, one question on command economies, and one question on marginal versus total benefit. So 5 of the 31 multiple choice questions come from Unit 1. So the other 26 are from this unit, okay? I'm going back to my, okay. So the next thing someone mentioned was tax incidence, but you're also writing consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss on here. I'm going to go over those. They're all interrelated, so that makes that really easy. Now, when I defined consumer surplus in class and I gave you the example of the pair of shoes, did everyone kind of follow me? Does anyone not understand what a consumer surplus is? If you do not, comment and I will go into it. All right, from no comments, I'm going to guess that we're good on consumer surplus. Producer surplus is the opposite. It's what, I'll go over it. Okay, so consumer surplus is the amount, I'm sorry, emails keep popping up on my screen. Okay, so consumer surplus is the amount that a consumer is willing and able to pay, so that's your demand, above the market price. So whatever equilibrium price is, if they're willing and able to pay more, then they have a consumer surplus. So what I got, the example I gave in class was with the shoes. If there's a pair of shoes that you guys really want and the shoes are $100, you're going to work and save up until you have that $100 to buy the shoes. The day you walk in to buy them, if they're suddenly on sale for $80, are you going to still pay $100? Would you make them keep your money? My guess is not. My guess is you would want your change back, but you were willing and able to pay the $100. You were ready to go at $100. So you have a consumer surplus of $20. You were willing and able to pay $100. They were only $80. You get to keep that $20. If you add up every person, every consumer's surplus in the market, you would get to the consumer surplus on the graph, because every consumer has a different price point, a different maximum price that they are willing and able to pay. So on a graph, we find that number by starting at our equilibrium price. Okay, you always start at your equilibrium price and you follow the demand curve up and you create a triangle, and that triangle represents your consumer surplus. So I'm going to graph that really quick. While I'm graphing that, producer surplus is the amount a producer is willing and able to sell below the market price. So when you think about that's supply, demand, quantity, price. Look, I labeled everything on my graph, you guys. Quantity at equilibrium, price at equilibrium. This is not as much fun without my fancy touchscreen board. Okay, so there's my graph. Okay, so my consumer surplus, I can look at this and already know that my consumer surplus is this triangle. Okay, price to demand, it's this upward triangle right here. I'm gonna color it in. I'm gonna pick a different color. I have purple, okay, purple. So I'm gonna go from price, I'm gonna follow the demand curve, and I'm gonna make my consumer surplus triangle purple. There you go. All right, so this is how much, this would be the amount people are willing and able to pay above equilibrium price for the market for whatever product. But maybe there are producers who are willing and able to sell this product below the market price. They're willing and able to haggle or strike a deal just to get rid of product, to get it off their books. Now, anything that they are willing and able to sell below the market price is their producer surplus. So we find that by always start at equilibrium price. That is always your starting point. So we start at the equilibrium price. We're going to go over to our supply curve and drop it down. Okay, drop it down. I'm coloring it in green because that's a bright color that I had handy on my shelf. Okay, so here's my producer surplus. All right. Now, you can see right now that my consumer surplus and my producer surplus color in the entire side of this graph. That means our total surplus is maximized. Consumer plus producer equals total surplus. We are efficient. We are allocatively efficient because we're producing at supply equals demand right there. So we have happy people. Everybody's getting what they want. Every consumer that wants the product at that price is able to purchase it. Every supplier that wants to sell at that price is able to sell it. Okay, so we are efficient and happy. This is a happy place to be. However, we can't always stay happy. Are we good right now with consumer and producer surplus at equilibrium? Because now I'm going to add a tax and bring us into a state of disequilibrium. Okay, so I'm going to add the tax to this graph, all right? When I add a per unit tax to my graph, supply will shift to the left. Oh my goodness, you guys, you have to know the shifters. You have to know the determinants that shift supply to the right or to the left. The determinants for supply are the acronym ROTTEN, ROTTEN, and I gave you that Prezi link. You have to have those memorized, guys. Determinants of demand is TRIBE, T-R-I-B-E. You have to have those memorized. You have to be able to read a question and know if it will shift supply or if it will shift demand, because when you have to graph it, you have to be able to do it. I'm going to show you the tax incidence in 1 minute. I have to graph it, and then I'm going to show you exactly how you determine that. Okay? So I'm going to graph my supply curve shifting to the left because taxes decrease supply. Okay. Here is my supply curve with a tax. All right. And because it's AP, I will include my directional change arrow so that AP gives me points. If you don't include a directional change arrow, no points. Okay. So there's my supply curve shifting to the left. There's my arrow showing it as a shift to the left. Now my original equilibrium point where supply equals demand is right here. But now I have a new equilibrium point up here. So I have to label that new equilibrium point. Otherwise, I'm not going to get any points. So at this new intersection, I have a new quantity. And I'm going to label it quantity with a tax, Q tax. And I have a new price. I'm going to label it price with the tax. Okay. So there is my new thing. Now you can already see that this market is going to be inefficient. It's going to be inefficient because we're no longer at the market equilibrium. We're at this artificial equilibrium created because of the government. All right. So let's talk. I'm going to talk from the top down on the graph. The first thing that happened is our consumer surplus decreased. You can see that because the purple triangle is about to get small. Used to be down here, but now our new consumer surplus is up here. Well, think about that. Obviously, if price goes up, consumer surplus goes down. It's bad for consumers when prices go up. So I'm going to get a different color, and I'm going to color in the new consumer surplus. So I have to color it darker so you can see that it's a lot darker than that purple. Okay, so here's my new consumer surplus up here. All right, now this purple, what is still light purple, that is the loss of consumer surplus. That is the change in consumer surplus. That is what used to be consumer surplus, but is no longer because of this tax. I want you to look at that purple area because you might have to shade something that looks like this purple area on your test tomorrow. That shape, that might be, part of your FRQ is this purple shape. When it says, where's the loss in consumer surplus from this tax? You guys picking up on what I'm saying? I hope so. Okay. So now that I have this new consumer surplus, I am going to find the area of tax revenue. The area of tax revenue is going to be based on the value of the tax and the quantity produced, okay? The value of the tax is always the distance between the supply curves at any given quantity. The biggest mistake people make on this graph is they try to measure the tax by going from dot to dot. They want to go from this dot to this dot, and they say that should be the value of the tax. But that is not how we calculate it. The value of the tax is the distance between the supply curves at a quantity. So going from dot to dot, you're skipping quantities. You cannot do that. You have to stay on one quantity and measure up and down. So I'm going to do quantity of the tax, and I'm going to measure from one supply curve to the next. I'm going to use, no, I've already used navy blue. I need a different color. It's kind of like gold-ish. I don't know. So I'm going to start at my new equilibrium and go down to my other supply curve. I'm just going to make a bold line right now so you can see what I'm talking about. So I picked this quantity, and I went from one supply curve to the next. That line is the value of my tax. But to find my tax revenue, I have to do my tax times how many units. And my number of units is my quantity at my tax. It's this amount right here. This times this line. So that quantity times this line is going to be my tax revenue. You can also find that by finding the area of the rectangle. So if I close this rectangle off right here, all the way across, I'm doing this from the camera angle, it's not easy, and go up, I've created a square. That square is my tax box. I'm going to square it in over here. I did pretty good on that, eyeballing it backwards through my camera screen. Okay, so here is our tax box, okay? So that box is my tax revenue. I'm going to do producer surplus, deadweight loss, and then incidence. So Z, I am getting to you. I have not forgotten, okay? All right, so now producer surplus used to be the green triangle, but now remember the producer doesn't get this money, it goes to the government. And nobody gets this money, it's lost. So our new producer surplus is this little tiny green box down here, or green triangle down there. So now I have to find a different color marker. I'm running out of pink colors. Dark purple, I guess. Okay, so I'm gonna go here. Okay, that dark purple, This is my new producer surplus. Obviously, it shrank because now the government is taking this huge cut of money that we don't have anymore. So now producer surplus has shrunk, and consumer surplus has shrunk. The government took a cut, and then we have this little bit left that used to exist but no longer does. And that little bit is our deadweight loss. That's the loss to society because of government intervention in the market, because of inefficiency. So that area is called deadweight loss. And now I'm going to highlight this triangle with that color didn't come out. Maybe this color will come out. Okay, I tried to make it blue. This is all going to end up one color at the end. I'm such a wreck. Okay, so there's our deadweight loss triangle. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is incidence. Who is paying the tax more, the consumer or the producer? To find out who is bearing the burden, what you have to do is take your tax box, that rectangle, and your original price. So for me, that's this point. Let me get something I can point with. This one. Okay. So my original price is right here. If I draw a line across, I'm going to try and draw a solid line like this. You can see that in mine, the green box is a little bit bigger than the purple box. So that means that the producer, the person on the bottom right here, is paying a little bit more of this tax than the consumer. Okay? They are bearing the more of the burden because their rectangle is larger than theirs. Okay? If the rectangles were the same size, exactly the same, then they would be splitting it evenly. If one rectangle is bigger than the other, that person is paying more of the tax, more of the burden. So you base your tax revenue rectangle, right, the distance between the supply curves, over to your axes, and you draw your line at your original equilibrium price. And that's going to tell you your tax incidence. Now, that incidence is also based on elasticity. The more elastic the demand curve, the more the tax incidence is going to be borne by the producer. The more inelastic, the more the tax incidence is going to be borne by the consumer. Think about it like this. If you have a product like an EpiPen, something necessary, people buy it no matter what, and the government institutes a tax, do you think that the producer is going to eat that tax and pay it themselves, or do they just raise the price and make you pay it? You're going to buy the EpiPen anyway, they're going to make you pay the tax. Inelastic goods, goods that are necessities or addictive. This really happens a lot with addictive products like tobacco or alcohol. They pass the tax off onto the consumer because consumers will pay. If a product's a luxury good and people won't buy it if the price changes, producers have to pay the tax because otherwise people are going to quit buying their product. So they have to eat that loss or eat that tax as part of their costs. Okay? Did I cover consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss? Okay. Are we okay on those? Okay. If there's no questions on those specific topics, I am going on to, somebody said world trade. Oh, hi, Mariana. I haven't seen you comment yet. I feel like Z and Ben and I are just having our own little conversation, and Gabby jumps in every now and then. Okay. The way world trade impacts a market is usually through a perfectly elastic supply curve or demand curve. So here is an example of the graphs that I've seen on AP. I have to remember AP and not get it confused with my ACE stuff right now. So we have this market, P, Q, S, and D. All right. So let's say this is the US market for, I don't know, thingamabobs. And we want to buy thingamabobs, but we want to import some too. So here's the world supply. Supply for the world, supply for the USA, and here's the demand in the USA. Okay. So here's our quantity at equilibrium. I'm going to show you the graph in a second. I'm just talking as I graph price at equilibrium. So here's a graph you would see. Here is American supply, American demand, world supply. If we did not trade, we would have this price and this quantity. If we engage in world trade, American companies are only going to produce this much because the price is going to fall down here. So this is the price with trade. I'm going to label it PT for price with trade. So here is the price with trade. So American companies are going to produce this much at this point right here. Drop that down. Quantity 1. Okay. So American companies are going to produce this much, and then we're going to import the rest to get us up to this much because Americans want more of this product since we can import it for pretty cheap. Is that an E or a 3? I just drew it backwards. I think that's an E. Yeah, that's an E. Sorry. I meant 3. Okay. So world trade, American production, import the difference between here and here. That way we can have this many products at this low price. Who benefits here? Well, consumers. Do you see where the price is? Price is low. Lots of stuff. That makes consumers happy. But American producers here are very unhappy because they used to make this many times this much money. Their total revenue used to be that dashed line. They made a lot of money. Now their revenue is only this price and this many, this little square right here. They've decreased their revenue a lot. They've lost a lot of money. That's not good for them. So the world trade market here hurt American producers. Okay. Now, here is, you can also have world trade above equilibrium, in which case we're going to import at the lower price and then have Gabby, no, supply would not decrease. American supply would decrease. And then remember, we'd use the world market to supplement to get us to quantity demanded. So we'd actually have more products at the low price because American products would stop at Q1. America would stop here producing, but not consuming. We'd buy Q3 minus Q1, this difference, we would buy and import from whatever country is producing it for cheap. So everyone would get the stuff that they wanted. We wouldn't have to decrease. So let me rephrase that. I'm rereading your comment. American supply would decrease. American-made products supply would decrease. But supply is not decreasing because it's not shifting or anything. Our quantity has dropped because the price is too low. A lot of American firms won't produce that. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. At this point, this has been for 45 minutes. So I want you to start thinking about other questions that you might have. I'm going to go through this and make sure we've talked about all of this stuff. I don't know what page is what though. Okay, page 26, last page. All right. Oh, you want to know what's funny? Oh, this is so cool. Okay, so the last 2 questions. Yes, Z, give me 1 second. Yes, Gabby, that is correct. American producers would be hurt. Yes. Since we were talking about trades, can we go over the effects of tariffs? Tariffs are going to restrict international supply. So that would be a way we would protect a domestic industry. So if we did not want us to import as much, so that tariff would move that world supply curve, instead of being beneath equilibrium, above equilibrium. Okay. So if the tariff made the world price higher, then we're not going to import much of that good. We're going to purchase the American products at that price instead. All right. Here we go. Okay. So looking at the test, the last two questions are actually what is the dollar amount of the tax? It gives you a graph and it's asking you, what is the dollar amount of the tax, which you should be able to determine because you know it's the distance between the two supply curves at any given quantity. So pick one quantity and measure the difference. That's the tax. If you want to check yourself, pick a different quantity, measure it, and make sure that number is the same, and you'll know. Okay. And the last question, what is the price paid by consumers and what is the price received by the producers? So we talked about that in class, and I just talked about that right now. There, Mariana, that's the last two questions. So looking at the graph, how much do consumers pay and how much do producers actually get to keep? There we go, 26 and 25. All right. Excuse me. And then the questions before those two, so question 25 through 30, are the 5 from Unit 1. So this one is on utility. I'm going to tell you to remember the marshmallows. That is a good question there. This one is on marginal and total benefit. This one is on comparative advantage. This one is the definition of freaking scarcity. If you can't define scarcity, I will lose my mind. Oh my goodness. Is that last question on producer and consumer surplus? Ben, no, it's not on the surpluses. It's actually straight up a graph, and it just says, what is the price paid by consumers? So you have to know, after a tax is added, how to find the price consumers pay. How do you find the new equilibrium price? And then after that, how do you find the price that producers get to keep? So give me 1 second. Put my graph back up here. Up there, that equilibrium point, this is a crappy marker because that disappears. Let me find a bright color that you can see. Bright point. Okay. So this equilibrium point right here tells us our new price for consumers, the price post-tax, and then you subtract the value of the tax, and down here, that's the price producers get to keep. This is the price for the producers. I'm labeling it P, price for producers, right there, right? So you have to just take the consumer price minus the tax to find the producer's cut. Yes. Yes, Gabby, the distance between the supply curves at any given quantity is the tax, correct. And Gabby, it's not asking about tax revenue, it's asking about the price. So it's asking about the top price and the bottom price of the box. That's what it's asking, right? Because the difference between the two is the government's cut. So you just need to know the price consumers pay minus the tax is the amount producers get to keep. Okay. So back to this, 29 is that, 28 is comparative advantage, 27 is the definition of scarcity. Freaking define scarcity, guys. That makes me so mad. 26 is a production possibilities curve. 25 is command economies. All right. 24, impact of a tariff. If the government imposes a tariff what will happen to imports? What will happen to imports price? And what will happen to the imports quantity? If the government taxes the import, not America, they tax foreign goods. What happens to the price of foreign goods? What happens to the quantity of foreign goods in American markets? I feel like that's pretty straightforward. Question 23. How does the sales tax impact? How does the sales tax impact the graph? Question 22 is a price ceiling. 21. Oh, 21 is two impacts. It has a tax and it has a change in supply and a change in demand. And you have to know if supply shifts one way and demand shifts one way, what happens on your graph. So you have to be able to draw supply and demand, price and quantity, shift supply, shift demand, and find your new equilibrium. So it's a double shift. That's what it's called, a double shift. This is a lot of graphs. If the price of mustard changes, how does that impact the market for ketchup? Number 19 is a price floor. Number 18 is about equilibrium price. Oh, I want to make sure you guys know the definition of market versus individual. Z, increase, drop. I don't know what we're talking about. Price would go up, quantity would, yes. Okay, I understand what you're talking, the tariff question. Yes, that would be the answer. I assume that's what you're talking about because that is the correct answer for that question. When we say market, we mean all the people. So the word market means all the buyers. The word market means all the sellers. So if we're asking market supply, we mean the supply of all the companies. And if we say market demand, we mean all the purchasers. So make sure you know what that means. Okay, I forgot what I was talking about. Area. Consumer surplus. The definition of consumer surplus. Producer surplus. Consumer surplus. Income elasticity. When income elasticity is negative, what does that mean? Tribe and rotten. Tribe is, I wrote this down for you guys before we started because I thought someone would ask and no one asked. So I wrote it down. Tribe. Taste preference in advertising. Related goods, complements or substitutes. Income, normal and inferior goods. Buyers' demographics and expectations of the future. So those are the determinants of demand. Income elasticity. If income elasticity is negative, what does that mean? I also wrote this down to show you guys just in case you needed to know. When EXY, that's cross price elasticity of demand, is negative, it's a complement. If it's positive, it's a substitute. Income elasticity of demand is negative, it's an inferior good. If it's positive, it's a normal good. If it's 0 to 1, it's considered a necessity. And if it's greater than 1, it's considered a luxury item. So those are your ranges for those elasticities. Z, fewer goods would be purchased. If it's negative, if YED is negative, you're talking about an inferior good. So that means more money. You don't buy it anymore. Because you're rich now, so you don't buy the cheap stuff. You buy the good stuff. So if income elasticity of demand is negative, it means you're dealing with an inferior good, like knockoff, like Walmart brand. Rich people aren't shopping at Walmart. Let's be honest, they're going to go to Target. No, they don't. Target's no better. They're going to go to Publix for their groceries. Okay. So then if it's a negative income elasticity, that means it's an inferior good. You buy less because you have money. I don't want to say like junk food because you have name brand junk food and then like knockoff. So like when your income goes up, you buy like cheese puffs. And if your income, you no longer buy like puffed cheese balls, like whatever knockoff version of Cheetos there are. So more like Whole Foods. That's funny. Yes, exactly. So there's that. Okay. You guys make my life better. Like you make me happy. Okay. Page 9. Here we go. Cross price elasticity. If cross price elasticity is negative. If you're wondering, a good's a complement when EXY is negative. That is a line from the song I told you guys to memorize and no one listened to me. You guys just laughed and I played nothing on you, but I promise that song is like the key to elasticity. The definition of cross price elasticity. My pages are all out of order and I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be looking at right now. This one. Price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, elastic demand, baby, elastic demand. Okay, demand curves of X and Y are shown in the graph above. Which of the following offers the most? Oh, it's going to show you I said not the slopes, but it's going to show you the slopes. So you have to know perfectly elastic, relatively elastic, unitary, relatively inelastic, perfectly inelastic. I think I did them backwards for you because this is me looking at it and I don't know if you see this mirrored or not. I have no idea how this looks to you, but you have to know those. Okay. That's that page. Elasticity. Oh, what shifts the supply curve? Rotten. The law of supply. Substitution and income effects for normal goods. So how does the substitution effect or the income effect impact a normal good? Complementary goods, substitute goods. And then that's the FR2. So then we're done. That's all the questions. I feel like I did that really fast, but that's it. I hope there wasn't anything there too scary. Gabby, you are like my sounding board because you looked at me like you were scared. If you Google search here, I'm going to type what it's called. It's called Nothing on You Econ. If you search that, I just typed it in on YouTube, you should get it. You should find it. Okay. Beautiful things. I'll buy because I should. All right. Money's not wasted. Prices have changed. Okay. I'm trying to find a blank piece of paper, Ben, so that I can answer your question. Okay. Cross price elasticity of demand, also called sometimes abbreviated EXY or XED. It's written all three ways. So I'm going to write those things down. Okay. So it's sometimes written EXY or XED. Depending on the textbook you use, these are the two different ways you'll see it written. EXY, or because E stands for elasticity. So you're measuring the elasticity of X and Y, or cross price elasticity of demand. Okay. Now what this measures is the percent change in quantity demanded of good X divided by the percent change in price of good Y. Okay. So how does one good's price change impact another good's quantity purchased? So what this really tells us are two goods complements, substitutes, or unrelated. If this formula equals 0, they are unrelated goods. They have nothing to do with each other. Okay? That's the easiest way to answer that. 0 is unrelated goods. If the solution is less than 1, if it's a negative number, okay, if this is a negative number, we know that they are complements. And if it's a positive number, they are substitutes. And I'm going to explain why. All right? So if this formula it's an elasticity of demand formula. So you know it should be negative because demand is downward sloping. So if price goes up, if this increases, this should be decreasing. If this increases, this should be decreasing because they move in opposite directions. So this formula should always, elasticity of demand should always be negative. Now, when we're comparing two goods, we want to see their relationship. So if, let's say I'm going to talk about two goods that go together, coffee and donuts, okay? If Jupiter Donut Factory has a sale on donuts, their price of their donuts goes down. Price would be a negative number. If this goes up, if the quantity demanded for coffee goes up, it increases, this would be a positive number. So that tells me that there is a complementary relationship between coffee and donuts. They go together. If they are two goods like hamburgers and hot dogs, a substitute good. Instead of a hamburger, you can buy a hot dog. Instead of a hot dog, you can buy a hamburger. You can eat either or. If, let's say, hot dogs go on sale, so the price of hot dogs goes down, it's negative. Are people going to buy the cheap hot dogs or the expensive hamburgers? Because they're substitutes, they're going to buy the cheap hot dogs. So the quantity demanded for hamburgers is going to fall. That's going to be a negative. A negative over a negative is positive. So that tells us those are substitute goods. They're substitute goods. Okay? So when this formula is negative, they're complements. And if it's positive, they're substitutes. And if it equals 0, they're unrelated. So if there's no change in the price or no change in the quantity, it's going to be 0. It's going to be an unrelated good. Let me know if that helped. If it didn't, tell me where I lost you, and I can do it again. Believe it or not, you guys, I actually like talking to you. I wish you guys asked more questions in class. Okay. Anything else tonight? Because it's almost 10. And some people still have playlists to do. If it's not done, you can turn it in late. That's not a big deal. I am doing a notebook check tomorrow. If you turn it in to me, you'll get however much partial or full credit that your notebook is completed. And then I will, I can always update your notebook grade if you finish more notes in the future. I feel like I have some viewers here, but then I look here and I'm only talking like 4 or 5 of you all night. No one else talks. I can give you guys the shout outs. Mariana, Z, Ben, Anthony, Gabby. Other Gabby talked earlier though. There's 2 Gabbies. I did pay attention. Look at you guys are all the same people. I'm scrolling. Oh, funny story. Maybe not. It amused me. I'm waiting to see if there's any further comments. Miss Elise asked me for help with her computer the other day. So I went in to help her and she wasn't pushing the buttons fast enough. So I started touching her screen to try and do things. But her computer's not a touch screen. It's her desktop. So I'm sitting here like pushing, getting mad at her computer because it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And then she just laughed at me. So there's that. Okay. Mariana, oh, never too much, never too much. Gabby, it'll be okay. Tomorrow is the ice cream social for those of you that got principal's honor roll for 4th hour. So there's that. I know they don't let you get your ice cream and come back to class, but if you want, I can try and see if I can sweet talk any APs to good night, Z. They'll let you come back, and if you tell them like you're taking a test, like you really need to be back in class. But I don't want you to not go get ice cream. You earned it. I will be in class tomorrow during 7th hour, and I can be in class during 6th hour if I need to be. But tomorrow's Wednesday. We also have NHS tutoring after school from 3 to 4. So I have to be on campus. So anyone who wants to, you do not have to, but anyone who wants to take the test or the quiz because they're out of the room for the ice cream social tomorrow has the option 7th hour or after school as well. I will be there. If you haven't done Quiz B, my plan is to unlock it tomorrow when you're logged into AP Classroom so you can do the test and then just go into the quiz. Whenever you're done submitting the test, you can just go and do the quiz that everyone else already did. That's the general plan, at least. If you don't have enough time, I will work out another day. Now, I am super hopeful that for Unit 3, maybe some of you guys practice better time management because I have so many games and activities that I'm not getting to do because so many of you are so far behind. So please, please try and make better use of your time in class and attempt to do at least one thing for econ every night. Because if you do that, when I have my people who are on task and finish the playlist and they are done and ready to go, and I can't begin to explain how much better their lives are because they're less stressed about this class. I can't help you in stats, but they're less stressed about my class. Calc is too difficult for me, and I don't believe chem exists because it's so complicated. No one can actually understand what is happening there. But at least if I can take some of the stress away from econ, that would be beautiful. Okay, it is 9:59. I'm going to go and do my work for the rest of the night so that hopefully I can go to bed. Maybe. But have a good night, guys. Don't stay up too late studying. Try and get some sleep. And I will see you in the morning. All right? Yes, Mariana, I have a notebook check scheduled. If you're not done with your notebook, I would highly recommend turning it in partial so at least you get some points instead of a 0. And then you can always resubmit your notebooks. I take notebooks over and over again until you get full credit. So that's no problem. Okay? All right. Good night, guys.